South podcast. I'm your host Dylan Gibbons.
And I'm Zak Jackson.
And this is Tim Dunphy, the producer.
Nice to meet you.
And you, nice to have you here.
Thank you for joining us.
Got first question, when did you start?
When did I start? Well, I mean, I was always interested in music. I can remember the thing I looked forward to most about going to secondary school was learning to play drums. Because, you know, primary school music's always a bit... So, you know, I wasn't looking forward to, like, the class or anything. I was looking forward to having, like, the extracurricular lessons, that kind of thing. You know, I did that for a few years, and I was always quite a rhythmic person. So I picked up music production when I was about 14, started teaching myself, you know, YouTube, that kind of thing. The internet's a wonderful place. You can teach yourself anything these days. Yeah. Did that for a few years, went to university when I was 19, which would have been 2012. Started my business in 2014 when I was in my final year of my degree, and I started doing production work for a local client. And then, yeah, as soon as I finished university, hit the ground running, already had my company set up with my accountant, all registered, everything like that. And I just kind of started doing stuff from there.
So pretty quick.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it didn't take... Because I started doing it while I was in my degree, it wasn't one of those things where I had to finish and then go, what do I want to do with my life? It already kind of populated itself, you know?
Come out of uni with something to carry on working on, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And it was already there, and the guy I was working with was pretty committed, and, you know, he had quite a good job, so he was prepared to throw quite a lot of money at it. You know, when you're living at home and you've just finished university, pulling in £500 a month is like pulling in $5,000 when later in life. It's like, you're like, what do I do with all this money? You've got no bills, you live at home, you're just starting out, you know, that kind of thing. And my dad was always really supportive. He wasn't one of those kind of people that's like, you must go and get a real job, you know, the arts are a joke, you're never going to make any money. He was like, give it a go. If you can do it, then that's great, absolutely, you know, that kind of thing. So, yeah, I kind of got on with that, and it was just up from there, really.
You said your first client was a local client, just talking about them. What genre? What was the work?
It was sort of, I guess, I don't want to say pop because I don't like that word, but like it was kind of, you know, dancey, housey kind of pop music, you know, that kind of tropical vibe you kind of get, you know, with lots of marimbas and that kind of thing.
Yeah, with like the house.
Yeah, it's kind of like, you know, it's pop music, but it's kind of, it's got a housey vibe, that kind of thing. And this is what he was basically, as a friend actually, I went to college with him, fantastic piano player, and he's a piano teacher now. And we actually ended up doing a lot of other stuff, which I'll tell you about later, but we started out doing stuff. He'd always been in kind of bands and this kind of like electronic rock bands, you know, that kind of thing. And he'd always been good at playing keys and doing synth work and that kind of thing. And he wanted to start doing this more kind of commercial vibe. But obviously, the thing is, it's like, you know, skill sets. He was a fantastic composer and piano player. Couldn't use music production software to save his life. And he was kind of sitting there thinking, well, what's the point of me wasting my time spending years trying to get to the point where I can make something that sounds good when I can just work with someone I know, you know? Yeah. So he used to come around to my house, or my home studio, which effectively at the point was just my house. You know, and we used to spend 3 or 4 or 5 hours a week, you know, working on his productions. We used to bring singers in. We used to occasionally go to the studio if we needed to record instruments, that kind of thing. And yeah, we just kind of did. And in the end, I think I don't do much work with him these days because he's kind of moved on to more kind of like live playing and that kind of thing. But we must have made hundreds of songs, you know, a lot of music. Yeah. Unfortunately, he never really made much of any of it. I think it got to a point. I think to start, he was kind of wanted it to be a thing, and that's what he always wanted to do. And then he was finding it difficult. You know, the music industry is a hard thing to break into, and he was finding it hard. And he realized he kind of got to a point where he was like, I'm enjoying doing this because I like making the music, but like this isn't going to be my career. You know, and he was already quite a successful piano teacher. You know, and he's got clients, he's got a list of people waiting to come and take lessons from him. He's that busy. I think in the last few months he's actually hired a couple of people to work for him. He's that busy, and he does a lot of live piano playing and that kind of thing. So, you know, it kind of got to a point where he didn't really need it to be his career. He was just doing it for fun. You know, So which was good, and it was great for me because when we first started out, especially when you're first starting out a business, the thing you don't need is a lot of pressure. And a lot of like, this needs to be done now. I demand this. I'm not paying you for that. Blah blah blah. He was just like, let's hang out, let's make some music, and I'll pay you. You know, which is dream.
So since from then to now, how much would you say music demand, the genre wise? You know, how much has it changed? Like, was it sort of indie before when you first were doing it, or was it always sort of electronic? It's not always too long ago. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's always like him particularly has always been kind of like electronic stuff. But interestingly, later on, we actually through him, I ended up doing some production work for. I don't know if you've heard of the boy band Concept. One of the guys in that was the cousin of one of the guys from One Direction. So they did all right actually, and
Yeah.
they used to do like European tours and they used to sell out shows and that kind of thing. They did some quite good stuff. I think they've disbanded now, but I ended up doing some production work for them because my client was the session pianist for their band, and when they did like live shows, so I ended up doing some production work for them. So there was that kind of side of it, and then through that, my client met their client's manager, he actually produced the first 3 Black Sabbath albums. So he's a pretty renowned guy. I can't remember. I think his name's Richard something. I never met the guy, so I don't know him that well. But he was quite high up. He had a nice studio in London, this kind of thing. He knew a lot of people. And my client Lewis, like I say, he was a fantastic piano player. And it got to the point where this guy was saying to him, look, do your dance stuff. That's what you want to do. But you could also make quite a bit of money doing sync work with piano playing. He was like, come up with some original piano tracks. Come to my studio. We'll record them, and we'll get them on the Dolby shelf. And he was like, I'll do it, but I want to work with my producer. So we ended up going to the studio, recording all these tracks, and I recorded all these really great piano tracks, and we had this massive room with a proper grand Steinway grand piano, microphones all over the place, so we could have loads of different choice, which was a great session. Recorded these 5 or 6 tracks, got them all set up, and then we actually, in the end, that CD ended up on the Dolby shelf. So in London, at Dolby Studios, they have this like library room. It's called what's called the Dolby shelf. And on this shelf is loads and loads and loads of music that's available for sync for like games, films, TV, all that kind of stuff. And it's all kind of categorized by like instrument type, mood, all that kind of thing. And basically TV executives, film executives, all that kind of thing can come up to the Dolby shelf and say, we're doing a TV production. We need some sad piano music. Can we go to sad piano? And then you can pull CDs off the shelf and you can listen to stuff basically. So we actually managed to get a CD on the Dolby shelf in the end, which I was credited on, which was really good. And then about 3 months after that, one of those tracks got picked up for about 20 seconds on Downton Abbey. So we had a track, and they only took a little. It was like a 5 or 6 minute song, but they took a tiny little, just to fit a piece. So 20 seconds. And I think so far royalties wise, we've pulled in about $9,000. This was 5 years ago, but you've got to bear in mind, Downton Abbey is a huge program, and it gets replayed all over the place. It's all over the place. And we, he was always really cool. So we had because he did most of the composition. I only really recorded it. Normally, engineers don't get cuts for that kind of thing. But he was always really cool because I'd done a lot of stuff with him. I had helped him out with things. So he gave me a 25% writers credit for it as well. So I've received a quarter of that $9,000 over the last 5 years. So it comes down to like £500 a year. It's not a life-changing amount of money, but
no, that's still.
And it's one of those things that continues to roll. How big Downton Abbey got. They're making Downton Abbey film now, so it continues to perpetuate. It's like if you were the guy who if you were Hans Zimmer and you composed the theme song for The Simpsons, that song probably pays for his life. Yeah, in fact, there was a guy who went to my university. This was years before I was there, but he actually wrote all the stings for Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. So all the theme music, that kind of like dun 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 thing that's in the background, all like all those little stings and everything. He wrote all of those, and they're all licensed under his name and then used for the show. He's a millionaire now, because you think how many times that show gets played all over the world.
Yeah.
If an episode of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, even if it's reruns, gets played 250 times around the world. How much money do you think that comes in royalties? Yeah, and that music's throughout the whole thing, and it's like an hour-long episode. So there's a lot of money in sync. So yeah, it was interesting. He did a lot of different stuff, and we never actually did more classical stuff after that because he kind of went off. He was like, it was fun to do, and it's I can do it, but I want to do like the kind of electronic stuff, So, but it's interesting. It's one of those clients that's it's nice to work with because we're friends first. So he's chill, and we get to do a variety of different stuff. So.
Great
and it led me on to a few other things as well, which is good.
So you said you started off in primary school playing instruments, and then you got into the tech side when you were 14. When did you decide that doing something tech-based was what you wanted to do for a career?
Ooh, that's a really good question. See, when I first started out, the reason I got into production was because I wanted to be a DJ. And, any DJ worth their soul is a producer as well. There are some fantastic DJs out there who are just DJs, and they're like, I'm no more than just a DJ. I'm just really good at putting songs together. And that's fair enough. If that's what you want to do, that's what you want to do. But I got into, we're talking mid-late 2000s at this point. So dubstep scene, massive. Still quite new. And of course, at like 14 years old, I was like, want to make beats. wanted to make drum and bass, wanted to make dubsteps, wanted to be like, you know, headbanging and, you know, DJing and that kind of thing and playing shows. So yeah, exactly. Well, you know, it is, but like, I mean, I'm older now, so I don't care about that much stuff as much anymore. It's just personally my life has moved on from there. But like, you know, so the thing for me was like get into production, learn how to make this kind of music, push out a few singles, meet a few people, and then try and book some shows, you know. And in the end, I mean, by the time I remember I used to work in bars, and I used to lie to the managers and tell them I was 18 when I was 17 so that they'd let me play, because obviously you weren't actually allowed to go in. Yeah. I accidentally made the mistake once of turning up to work on my 18th birthday and telling everyone it was my 18th birthday. And he was like, hang on a minute. I was like, well, I'm 18 now, it doesn't matter anymore. And he was cool, so it was all right. Then, yeah. But, you know, yeah, 17, I mean, it was brilliant. Like, you know, imagine this, right? You've just turned 18, so you're like, you can go to bars, you can start going out, all that kind of thing. And sort of 18 to 21 is like that time of your life where you're out every Friday and Saturday, you know, on the lash, having a great time. I spent 18 to 21, every Friday and Saturday for those 3 years, I DJ'd in a bar, right? So every Friday and Saturday, and a lot of Wednesdays as well, when student nights used to be a lot bigger, I used to get paid to DJ and drink for free all night with my friends, because I was playing in bars where all my friends were going. So I spent those, I used to go out and come home 150 quid up on a night out. And I'd get hammered. I could still play. I could do it. You know, I had the capacity to have like 9-10 beers and then still play. And admittedly, there were a few nights where I played the same song 3 times in a row, but everyone else was so drunk, no one noticed. You know, which was brilliant. So that's why I kind of got into production. It was like I need a few of my own songs, especially when I wanted to book more specific shows, going to do like drum and bass events and dubstep events and that kind of thing. And I used to do shows. I used to have a residency in Vauxhall. I played Fabric. I played Cable before that shut down. I've played Light and Firebox in Vauxhall. What else did I do? I did Hidden, which was like one of the biggest dubstep events that was ever put on. The one night only thing. I've played in Southampton, I've played in Bournemouth, I've played in Portsmouth, I've played in Reading. I used to have a residency at the Purple Turtle in Reading. You know, I used to play all over the country. I even DJ'd in France a couple of times. It was kind of like a random thing where I just ended up in the country with stuff with me and met someone who was like, come down to our thing, we'll let you play. You know, it was pretty trusting, but, you know, I was obviously very convincing. So, but yeah, that was kind of, I guess that's, if I had to put a pin on it, that's my route into production was being able to make stuff so that I could show people that I was serious, you know, and I wasn't just like, oh, let me have a go at DJing because I can put 2 tracks together, you know, which is an art in itself, but not as difficult as kind of breaking into a scene musically and that kind of thing. And then kind of, you know, once I got a bit older, I got a bit bored of the kind of DJing, staying out, you know, doing a set at 2 a.m. and having to get home at like 4 and then get up in the morning and go to work or whatever it was. And I started moving, especially when I was at university, I started moving into kind of the recording side of things and wanting to do more with like real instruments. And that's why these days, like, you know, personal hobby wise, I do a lot of like hip hop production. You know, I like to work with samples, like real instruments and that kind of thing. It's more appealing to me now, a kind of more natural feel as opposed to like heavily electronic stuff. It's just more kind of what I like to do. And I think that's because I got into doing a lot more recording and a lot less production. You know, and that's just the natural progression of where I was at, really. So.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, you said hobbies are now with actual instruments. Like, your favourite genre, does it stray far from electronic music completely, or is it like...
No, because like the origins of hip hop is inherently electronic. You know, it's not. We're not talking synths and that kind of thing, but we're still talking samplers, drum. You know, drum machines, that kind of thing. So it's more hardware electronic as opposed to synth electronic. You know, a lot of like, I think these days, a lot of like house, garage, bass kind of music is you just need a laptop and a pair of headphones and you can get started, you know. And admittedly, you can do that with hip hop as well. The internet's a wonderful thing. You can do pretty much anything with almost nothing these days. But you know, for me, the act of getting up early on a Saturday, driving an hour to go to a record fair to dig through crates full of like crumbs and dust and feel like you come out inhaling a brick just to go home, just, you know, I mean, it really is that bad because some of these records, I mean, I go and buy records that are like older than my dad. I own albums, like literally physical albums, not just like they were recorded then. The actual disc is older than my own father, you know. And like I'll go and pick up this stuff. Like it's a routine almost, you know. I go down there, I dig through 4,000 records to buy 2. I come home, I put them on the record player, I sit there and I read or I play a game or something else while I listen to. I kind of and part of it for me as well is not even the production and making the hip hop kind of stuff. It's absorbing all this kind of hidden music. It's just stuff that you would. This album was only ever put on vinyl because it was made 40 years ago, and if you don't buy the record, you're never going to hear it because it ain't on Spotify. It's not on YouTube. It's going to be hard to find. And it's great listening to this stuff. Some of my favorite albums that I own on vinyl were never used for sampling or for making hip hop, but they're things I never would have found otherwise. Like I look them up and I'm like, this isn't on YouTube, this isn't on Spotify, it's not anywhere on the internet. It's been catalogued as existing, but the actual audio is not available anywhere. And some of them are my favorite records, and I would never have found them otherwise, But it's that kind of routine of like getting it, putting it on, listening to it, and then hearing that 3 seconds, and you're like, I could really make something with that, and then doing the kind of digital side of things, put it on the computer and, playing around with stuff like that. That's what kind of is fun for me these days. And I guess it's the reason for that is it's similar to recording. It's similar to getting someone and plugging in a guitar and setting up a microphone and doing all that stuff and then getting onto the computer. It's got more of a tactile approach to it. And it's inherently more enjoyable for me these days.
Yeah, I think one of the best things for like any form of musician, whether you're doing tech side or actual instrument side, is going out, listening to music and finding the more unknown sort of hidden gems. And I guess when you're doing tech stuff, because you can like sample stuff and all that, you can then create something brand new with something that like hasn't been like touched before.
No, exactly. And I think that the other thing I really like about it as well is that it doesn't happen enough, but there's been plenty of examples where people have sampled something obscure, made a track that's ended up being really successful, which has then highlighted the original artist who created the sample and in turn allowed them to generate a lot of kind of back catalogue revenue. I can't think of the name of any of the people off the top of my head, but I've definitely read things before, where obscure kind of African artists have recorded something, got paid like £2 in the mid-50s or whatever. They're still poor now, and then someone samples them and they hear it, and instead of going, oh, a lawsuit, they go, oh, that's really cool, and then they go, well, I'm going to draw attention to you, and then all of a sudden they sell 50,000 copies of a song they recorded 40 years ago, and they go from being poor to having $10,000, but in Africa it's like being a millionaire, Yeah. So it's one of those. It draws attention to people, and it's. I mean, I can get where a lot of people are very anti-sampling and that kind of thing, and I can get where they're coming from. It's kind of, especially if what's done with it they don't approve of, because it's kind of, in a sense, defamation of character. You're manipulating something that they've done. But I feel like if I'd created something and someone sampled it, that would be flattering to me more than anything, because it'd be like you liked this enough to want to build on it, and it's just recycling the way I see it.
A lot of people that I think the people that complain about samples being like a bad thing, they tend to be like the people that are really in the industry and the ones that want to get money from something, and like they see someone sampling their stuff as, oh, they're taking my music away and I'm not getting the cash from it, whereas like a lot of smaller people see that as a way of like, oh, they're doing something with my
attention.
stuff.
And it draws attention to you. I mean, it's inherently the issue with the issue with sampling obviously is copyright, which is inherently flawed by capitalism. Most of the copyright laws we have these days were written 30 or 40 years ago and largely don't apply to anything that they still supposedly apply to. This is the problem. There's a big kind of argument for this as well, especially with the concept of art. Most artists don't actually want to be paid for the things they make. Plenty of people get into art, into film, into video game design, into music because they want to make a career out of it. But they only need the money because that's how you live. You have to have a house, so you have to feed, you have to have food, you have to buy new guitar strings, whatever it is. And a lot of people get into art because they like to make art. It's interesting. I was having a conversation with someone the other day about the kind of concept of like a national credit scheme, which is effectively what's going to have to be implemented eventually if robots automate everything and all these jobs kind of disappear, and you get to a point where there's going to be a large amount of unemployment because even now you look at the company like Ocado, they have warehouses that are completely run by robots. Amazon, they have warehouses. Amazon have got a blueprint for a massive drone that can fly around the country and like it can hover above London and then deliver things to you in like 15 minutes. And they'll fly it to like Download Festival, Reading Festival, and they can sell beer out of a floating city. It's crazy, you know. This stuff isn't. It sounds mad, but it's not impossible. It's stuff they can do. They will do it. And once I can't remember what there's a certain percentage of when automation passes a certain percentage, unemployment becomes a problem because a lot of people won't have jobs anymore.
Definitely.
And at that point, you have to implement a credit scheme whereby everyone gets given a certain amount of money a year, which can be used to pay taxes and to pay for rent and mortgages and that kind of thing, so that they don't have to work because their jobs have all been automated. And then at that point, anyone who wants to work can go and do, if they have a skill, you want to make music, you want to be a carpenter, you want to fix cars, you can go and do that, but you'll pay large taxes because what you're getting is extra over what everyone else is getting. If you want more, you can go and earn more, that's fine, but your taxes will pay for that credit scheme. But the interesting kind of thing that comes from that is that if everyone's on a credit scheme, let's say you were a painter, you were a director, and I was a musician, right? And you wanted to paint paintings all day long, you wanted to make short films all day long, I wanted to make beats all day long. Okay, if I've already got like a standard income that's going to pay all my bills, I don't need revenue. You don't need revenue. None of us need revenue from the things we're creating. If you don't need revenue from the things you're creating anymore, do we need copyright laws? Because inherently the copyright laws are there to protect the money that comes from art. But if no one cares about making money from their art, you don't need copyright laws anymore.
Yeah, of course.
Exactly, which means that we end up with basically fair usage everywhere. And the only issue of copyright then is whether you use someone's information to cause harm, that kind of thing, which will inherently be tackled over the next few years with the problem with fake news.
Don't you feel like, for example, an artist who releases something, I mean, it's their property. Don't you feel like some of them would want this copyright law?
I mean, I guess
it's their thing. They don't want it.
Yeah, I mean, what I'm talking about more is copyright from a fiscal perspective. It's if you created something and you were like, "This is mine. It can only ever be mine. No one else can do anything with it." Then copyright laws. But at that point, copyright laws would have to be updated to meet the new world. There's no way you could draw any relatives between the mid-'80s and a future society where no one has to have a job anymore. You just wouldn't have even imagined that was possible in the mid-'80s, mid-'90s when most of these laws were drafted. So it comes down to more of a point of, and I think as well, because there's less money involved, people will be more willing to respect those who want their stuff to not be messed with. Because, I can say, right, I've got 1,000 records, 2 of them are by artists who said they don't want their stuff messed with. Fair enough. I've got 998 other ones I can work with. I'm not gonna, it's not gonna be a huge problem for me. So yeah, it's an interesting one. The kind of fair usage and sampling nature of things, but it's just something we deal with at the moment.
It's crazy how things can change so drastically in such small spaces of time.
Yeah, I mean, the kind of copyright thing has been an issue since the 90s, especially with the rise of hip hop and electronic music. But even now, we're not that far down the line, 20, 25 years, it's less of a problem than it used to be, and far more stuff gets through the net and far more people care less. It changes a lot. It's just one of those things. Laws are written and then things change and people are unwilling to adopt changes or unwilling to negotiate for changes. It's the problem with this country and the fact that it's run by, old white men, dare I say. Might be a little bit edgy for a music podcast, but, it's I won't go any further, but it's you can't have the ideals of whether sampling is correct or not cannot be decided by an 80-year-old person, 70-year-old person.
No.
Recorded music barely even existed when they were a kid. So it's
But it tends to be done by the people that are more likely to benefit from it, though.
Exactly, it's like what you were saying. And that's what we've kind of been saying. It's the capitalist nature of it, and that generation of people are very well off, and once you're well off, you want to be more well off. It's the nature of generation of that generation. But it's probably a conversation for another day, and another podcast.
Moving on a little bit, I just wanted to ask you about the local scene and how you come into that. Do you work with artists and acts around here, but do you also work as a sound engineer by any chance? Do you do that at venues? Or?
I've DJ'd in Southampton a few times. I can't remember, what's that massive club? It's not actually in the middle of Southampton. It's got loads of floors and there's a disco.
Oceana.
That's the one. I've played there before. That was years ago. It's been so long I can't even remember what it was called. I was only about 20 at the time, so I've played there, and I've been to plenty of venues in Southampton, to see. I've been to the Brook quite a lot, because that's obviously quite a famous venue.
What would be your favourite one?
That's a good question. Probably the Brook. I don't know. I think it attracts a certain level of nice. I've been there to see bands like UFO, who were, in the height of their career, they were selling out arenas in America playing to 100,000 people. And then they're happy to come over here and go to the Brook and play to 20 people, or however many it is. It's nice. And I think it's great that Southampton has something like that. It's like it's the equivalent of the 100 Club in London. It's like small, intimate venues where you can come and see bands who would normally play bigger shows but are willing to play these smaller venues because they understand that their fans want to have that more intimate show, and it's great.
That's a good thing about Southampton. Like the only big place people could play at is the Guildhall, and then the rest of it is just smaller.
Exactly. I've been to some of the open mic nights at the Alex before, and that kind of thing, and played with their people there and seen bands there, and that place is great as well. It's by no means the greatest place in the world, but it knows what it is.
It's humble.
It knows what it is. It's got a pool table. It's got some video games. It doesn't try to be.
It got a pool table?
Yeah, it doesn't. Yeah, no, it does.
Didn't know that.
Maybe they don't always have it out because it's by the kitchen.
Oh no, by the stage bit.
But it doesn't try to be like some sort of fancy avant-garde. Look at us, we'll charge £20 for a plate of chips kind of place. I remember going down the last time I was down there. There was a sign outside saying that they were going to be showing WrestleMania. I was like, brilliant. I would love to go to the pub and watch WrestleMania. That would be hilarious. And I would. That's the kind of thing I like. It's like we're a pub in a student town, and we know that. We're not trying to be anything more than that, and we're not trying to be a family pub because that does my head in. And if every pub's a family pub, where are we supposed to go?
Yeah. I mean, they've got their own little
niche.
Yeah. They are them. Mm-hmm. It's the same with the Hobbit. They are
exactly.
The Hobbit.
Yeah.
Lord of the Rings.
How do you think because there's a lot of small venues and it's quite like they're all like rooted in themselves and they're quite grounded. How do you think that's affected or like had an impact on the local music scene? If you think it has,
I don't know. I like that. I like that there's choice. There's a few different places and you can kind of, maybe a little bit of crosstalk would be a little bit better just to kind of get things rotating a bit more. But I like that you've got like a kind of, instead of there, in some towns you've got like, there's this club, where do you want to go? That's it, And I like that it's sort of, you can go, okay, there's 5 or 6 different places, and all these places have got live music on, as opposed to just being pop music, or I want to kill myself, pop music, and you can go. Let's go to the Alex because they've got a hip hop band on. Let's go to the Brook because they've got some really famous band on that you wouldn't expect. Let's go to the Joiners because they've got some metal bands on. What do you feel like doing? And it's great to have that variety. I think it's an important thing, especially considering the amount of venues and pubs that are shutting down these days. I mean, I'm pretty sure I read. Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty sure I read something the other day that 2 pubs in this country shut down every day. Cool. And it's I mean, thousands. We're a nation of alcoholics, But like it's a problem again rooted in capitalism, and rooted in the fact that Weatherspoons have a lot of money and independent pubs don't, and it relies on I think the success of small venues is very similar to the success of musicians in that you don't. If you want to support a musician, right? Let's say someone who's like they make a living out of their music, but they're not world famous, but they do all right. If you say, "Oh yeah, I support them by streaming their music on Spotify," you're not supporting them because you're contributing about 67p to them every year. But if you say, "Oh yeah, I buy his albums, I go to his shows, I buy the T-shirts," that is the stuff that contributes. Yeah, that's the stuff that supports it. And it's the same with like small venues. It's like, "Oh yeah, I go down there for a pint after work." What's that £3 going to do? But if you're like, I really believe in this venue, and even if it's not like a band I've heard of or maybe my favorite thing, I go to that gig. I go to gigs there like at least once a week because if I go to a whole gig, I'm gonna buy 3 or 4 pints. I might buy a packet of crisps, and I'm gonna hang around, and you're gonna put 10, 15 quid behind the bar, which is much more valuable, and it keeps these people alive. I think it's recognizing that, and especially if you are a musician in Southampton, because if you want to be a musician in Southampton, You need these venues to get exposure. If you want to be a successful musician, you have to go out and play shows. You need people to know who you are. And if you want to go out and play successful shows, you need venues that know what they're doing. If you don't support these venues by going to the gigs and and doing the networking, that kind of thing, they won't be there much longer, and you will have nowhere to build your platform, and you won't get anywhere, because you can't just go, we're a band, let's go to London, because and go, oh yeah, let's go and play the World's End. Yeah, all right then, join the list. There's very rarely these days. I've been to a lot of gigs at the World's End and Underworld, and I can't remember in the last few years a time when I've been there, looked at the gigs kind of board that they've got, and seen a band I've not heard of. It's a world famous venue at this point. You go to you think of Camden, Electric Ballroom, and you've got what's the other one? There's the World's End. There's the one at the something Hearts. The Black Heart, which I think is opposite, and that kind of. And then there's the basement one as well. But anyway, these are all small venues. They're pubs effectively. They're not big, maybe 100 to 150 people, but they're always packed out, and they're always full of bands that are all over the world. It's crazy. I mean, you're not gonna that pub. I'm sure it never used to be like that. I'm sure when it first opened up, it was like local punk bands in it's in bloody Camden. So it's probably loads of local punk bands and that kind of thing. And it built from there. They built up their repertoire. And admittedly, in London, that's an easier thing to do. There's so many more people, but it's the same. You can have that effect down here, and it's why the Brook has gotten to a point where you kind of think, oh, it's a tiny little pub in Southampton. What are bands like UFO doing playing there? But they do. They play there because it's got that reputation, and because the people that know that it's there, and the people that like the fact that it's there, go there and put the money in their pockets to keep it there, And they fight because they were going to shut the Brook down as well, weren't they? Yeah. And there was a petition for that, and it got revoked, and they aren't going to shut the Brook down now. Well, it's safe for now. I mean, development will probably tear it down eventually, but
it's like just the firehouse is going down now.
Yeah.
I don't know if they're relocating or.
I'm pretty sure they're relocating.
Yeah. But if you don't support, if you don't band together and support these things, especially as musicians in a local area, then you won't have them.
Yeah, no.
If you don't look after these toys, you don't get to play with them.
A lot of underground scenes are just sort of dissolving away at this point, because so many people are so more focused on what's going on popular wise, what's trending and stuff like that everyone completely forgets
everyone
about
wants to be a part of the trend. Because maybe it's something to do with feeling like fitting in.
Everyone forgets about what's going on underneath the streets, really.
Yeah, I think there's a big problem with social media and that kind of thing, but again, it's a whole different thing. But I think it has to be supported, and I think it needs to be supported. I think that like you say, there needs to be people who are in it because they want to be in it, not in it because they want to be cool or because they want people to care. This is why I think, I don't know if you know Jay, the pianist from Roots to Roots, and that guy puts on an open mic night nearly every night of the week. But he doesn't do it for himself. He's not like, look at me, I'm a great pianist. I'm gonna, he does it because he knows people like music and because he loves playing music. And he goes and he puts these shows on. He doesn't even necessarily play at all of them, but he puts them on regularly, week after week after week, even though he's got his own company and other commitments.
In theory, that just to most people makes him a cooler guy anyway, because that's like, oh, this guy's sound.
Possibly, possibly, but
I see what you're saying.
It's more of a within himself. He's not doing it to kind of get famous or be that just guy. He's doing doing it because he wants to give people that opportunity and because he loves music.
It's one thing being in a playing music and be like, oh yeah, I look cool, and then actually playing in a band or on your own, and you're like, you love what you're doing and you go support others, and they're two different things.
When you want to do something, when you put your heart into it rather than just doing it because I just want an image, you can really see the outcome of whatever they're doing tends to be a lot better in quality and stuff like that. Things will come out a lot better because.
I think the thing is as well, Jay doesn't need to worry about looking cool because that man can play.
Yeah, he can.
He knows he's cool.
Went down there the other night. And, incredible.
Exactly. Incredible. So, but there's a scene everywhere. You have to look for it. But it just, it has to be supported by the people that are a part of it, because if you don't, it won't be there. And then when it's your turn and you're like, right, it's time to push our band, it's time to push my image. Oh wait, I've got nowhere to push it because everything's shut down. What do I do? And then you're left with leaving town, and which is going to be harder because people don't know you, and you're trying to, and if you've got no image already, people aren't going to go, well, why should I? We're going to go, why should I put you on? Yeah. If you're local, they're going to go, oh, we'll put you on because you're local, But if you're not, Why should we put you on? You're not anybody. You don't know anyone, you know. And then the other option you got is busking. And where does that ever really get you anywhere? Unless your name's Ed Sheeran.
And you can't really. There's hardly any spots to busk now.
No,
anyway.
exactly.
There's free on the high street. And that's it.
Exactly. And most of them are normally filled with homeless people. So.
So going back to you as a producer, and it kind of links in talking about an oversaturated. Well, because music is generally oversaturated these days. What are the difficulties that you have to overcome in working as a producer, whether it be trying to get clients in or just trying to push your stuff out there?
I think, marketing is an issue in itself. I mean, you know, I work as a sole trader, so I'm not only the producer, but I'm the accountant, and I'm the marketing person, and I'm HR, and I'm PR, and I'm everything, you know, so which is just stupid because you can't do all those things yourself. So yeah, I mean, like a lot of my business relies on word of mouth and kind of being put through from one client. So, I've got a friend who wants to do an album as well. Great, let me speak to him. I mean, I do some marketing, and I have got work out of that, you know, and I work with people all over the world. I have clients in America, I have clients in Asia, I have clients in Africa, I have clients all over Europe, you know, not thousands of them, but I have some. You know, I've got a global network, which is great for me because it means I can get into other markets, that kind of thing. But yeah, outside of marketing, I tell you the biggest problem is that it comes down to that kind of old rhetoric for self-employed people is, you know, you can have it done quick, you can have it done cheap, and you can have it done well. Pick two. Yeah, and everyone wants everything done for no money, really quickly, and to the best possible quality. It's not going to happen. You can have it done quickly, and you can have it done cheaply, but it's going to sound awful. You know, you can have it done sounding great and quickly, but it's going to cost you a fortune. You know, and it's this kind of thing. This is the biggest. And I, admittedly, in 6 years, I've only ever had one person not pay. You know, and that was only, I think it was something like $50, so that comes out to like £40. And I ain't about to fly out to Brooklyn to go and get £40. You know, and to be fair, that guy messaged me a couple of days ago actually to say that he was going to pay me. He said he'd been in prison. So, you know, I don't know whether that's true or not. But yeah, that's again, that's just a kind of a whole other thing. But like, yeah, I think the biggest problem is not the technical side of things, because I know how to produce. I know if I walk into a studio, I can get it done. You know, I know what I'm doing. I'm sure of my knowledge, and I've been doing it for long enough that I can go from band with an idea to mastered, polished, finished thing, you know. But yeah, the biggest problem is, I guess, is, and not to spite my clients, but my biggest problem is clients. You know, it's either getting them or dealing with them. And most of the time, they're great. They're humble people, and they're not trying to get something for nothing. They're just trying to understand how it works. And normally you kind of say, look, this is the way it is. This is the way it's always been. This is the way it's going to be. Are you happy with that? More often they're like, yeah, okay, fair enough. You know, I mean, you know, you would, wouldn't you? If you can try and get a few quid off something, you're gonna. Yeah. You know, it's just people are always like that. It's you know, if you can save yourself a few quid here and there, you can spend it on marketing down the line. You can spend it on something else or whatever it is. But I think that's probably the biggest issue, and I imagine that's probably the biggest issue for a lot of other producers, DJs, venues as well. You know, it's dealing with the people. They do what they do really well, but it's the sort of like, you know, oh, we're a local band who are nobody, but we expect to be paid 200 quid to play half-hour set. Well, we're not going to pay you 200 quid. You know, here's 50 quid, and you should be lucky you're getting that. That's not insulting. That's just the way it is. It's business.
Yeah. I think they should be paid.
Yeah.
I mean,
of course.
Like you said, 200 quid. That's half an hour with no name.
Yeah.
I get that. But I do feel like in Southampton, I think there's a lot of unpaid shows.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, at the start when you're small, you're like the first support act. I can get that, but like,
if you're headlining a show, you know, or if you've played a few shows, you should be getting paid.
And like,
I mean,
you notice
the act of not paying people for their art devalues their art.
Yeah.
You know,
and you find like some promoters they'll say like, oh, sell 20 tickets, then it's £1 per ticket, but you notice they run off before.
Yeah.
The
I've played a few of those shows before. Yeah, I mean, this is the problem. Again, it's the money side of things is always the problem, you know, because you get people who get into promotion because they want to make loads of money. They're like, oh, I'm going to get into promoting shows because I don't even have to do anything. All I have to do is phone around a load of bands, book them, tell them I'll pay them a tenner, and then run away at the end of the show, and I'm up 10 quid, you know. And people are like that, unfortunately. And like I say, I'm lucky enough to only have ever experienced that with one client. Every other client I've ever had has paid me. Maybe I have to coax it a little bit. And it takes a few weeks to get the money, but I get it eventually. It's fair enough. I give people 30 days to pay invoices, and they normally almost pay them on time. I think the longest we've had to chase someone was a few months. And that was because they were having some financial problems themselves anyway. But they paid me eventually, so it is what it is. It's not helpful for me because I've got bills to pay for, but you get by. You have savings, you're sensible. But yeah, I mean, going back to what you're saying about paying people, it's important. And I get it. If it's your first gig ever, you should be thankful that someone's giving you a stage.
Absolutely, yeah.
Even if they let you headline, even if they let you play for 2 hours, who cares? This is your chance to go out there and just practice being out there and playing live.
Yeah.
But once you've done that a few times, and maybe you've got a little bit of a social media presence, and some people locally go, oh look, so and so is playing, whereas in any other town no one would know who that is, but they know because it's local. At that point, yeah, if you're bringing people into a venue, you should be being paid for it.
Yeah, and I feel like, especially when costs come underneave.
Yeah.
For like petrol.
Yeah,
People,
I mean it's even simpler things than that. That you have to change your strings every time. You play a few shows, you need new strings. Drumsticks break. Drum skins need replacing. The petrol is a whole another kind of side of it. It's just it's the wear and tear.
Yeah,
in general. So, but yeah, it's important.
Would you say you've ever had like a real serious, say, argument with a client in the past where they've been like, well, I want this, and you've been like, well, I feel like this is right, where you know your knowledge but they know what they want? Has there been any?
I wouldn't say I've ever come to blows with anybody. I mean, there's always an element of sort of this is the right way to do it and this is the way you want to do it, but you have to kind of find a middle ground with clients. If you're expecting someone to pay you, you can give them all your knowledge and you can try and convince them what the best option is going to be. If they won't go for it, they won't go for it, and that's just the way it is. And hopefully they learn from that down the line. You tell them how it should be, they go a different way. You do it for them, they pay you 6 months later, they're like, oh, I'm back, and can we do it the way you wanted to do it? Because actually it sounded a bit rubbish. And it's like, yeah. And I'm not that kind of person who's going to be like, hey, I told you so. No, I won't work for you ever again because you're a moron. Yeah, exactly. And I just, even outside of professionalism, I'm just not that kind of person. I don't know. I'm not going to judge you. If you've got a way of doing things that you want to do, that's fine.
Yeah, and if they want to try it out, but if they then realise, I'm not too keen on that after all.
No,
it's not hard to go back.
Personally, it's exactly. I mean, it's art, But I mean, personally, I'd say the biggest issue that I've had is working for other companies. When I do work for other studios and that kind of thing, because then you're not just dealing with a person, you're dealing with someone, and it's not even that you're dealing with a few people, it's that you're dealing with someone who thinks they're above you. And I've worked for some companies before with some real pretentious people, who really are a bit ego driven, and they're like, I'm an engineer as well, but I need to hire you to come in and do some work because I haven't got time to do it. And then you go to their studio and you know what you're doing, you're sure of yourself, and they go, oh, I wouldn't do it that way. Or you shouldn't do it that way, or you don't know what you're doing. And it's like, well, why did you hire me? If you don't think I know what I'm doing, why are you paying me? And you have to kind of take a breath and just go, look, fair enough, I'll give it a try your way, but this is how I normally do it. And if you've got logical reasoning for things and you're good at arguing, not arguing in the kind of sense of shouting at each other, but just an actual argument, then that's fine. But I'd say, I'd imagine, and again, this probably relates a lot to bands and to venues and that kind of thing. The people that are probably the hardest to deal with are the people who think they're above you, because some promoters probably think they're above you. Or without me, you won't get a shot. And it's like, well, don't dictate to me why I should be allowed to have a show or not. Do you want to book me or not? You're the one who's booked me and you're the one who's paying me. Let me go on stage and do what I do. You do what you do. And venues are the same. It's kind of the battles against brewery costs and that kind of thing. It's like, well, we're the ones who sell the beer. You make the beer. Just sell us the beer and we'll sell the beer. Stop trying to be difficult about it, whatever it is, and that kind of thing. So I think it's, again, I hate to go back to it, but it's largely the money side of things is always the biggest problem.
Definitely.
Yeah. Because everybody wants to keep the most. They want the biggest piece of the pie. And it's just a problem. So
what would you say about you as a producer? What would you say draws clients in compared to other producers? What do you reckon there is about you?
I don't. It's an interesting question. I mean, I wouldn't. It's a bit of a crap answer, but I wouldn't say there's anything particularly special about me. I think the thing that draws people to working with me and that brings people back is that I'm not one of those people that we just talked about. I'm not someone who's going to
Yeah,
sit
of
there
course.
and say like, oh, you should change those lyrics, or that melody's awful, or what are you doing? You know, I'm there because I want to be there, because I like doing music, you know, and I respect everybody's art, and people like working with me because they, you know, I'm a nice guy, you know, not to sound conceited, but like I'm a nice person. I know what I'm talking about. I'm not one of the people who's going to sit there and going, "Ooh, I will tell you what I think, you know, I'm not going to beat around the bush. If I think you're singing like you're singing out of key, or your guitar needs tuning, I will say you're off key, let's do it again. But I'm not going to say it in a kind of, oh my god, how terrible are you kind of way. I'm going to say,
no,
look,
you just like, oh,
it's professional.
your
You know, I'm just going to say, look,
guitar,
you're paying for
yeah.
studio time, and I want you to get the most out of your studio time.
Yeah, of
You need
course.
to retune and do that again, or you need to run that part again because you were flat on
Yeah.
that note, or whatever it is. You know, and I'm not going to be brutal, but I'm going to be
That's
honest,
the way to
which,
do
is,
it,
which is
yeah.
what people want most of the time. I
Yeah.
find people they're kind of like, oh, thanks for, you know, not letting me play the whole song through with my out of tune guitar, even though I didn't notice, because that would have been a whole 5 minutes wasted. I stopped you. Let's get it right. Let's do it again.
Yeah.
And I think people respect that. A, I tell it how it is, but B, I do that because I do know what I'm talking about. So they come to me, they bring me a project, it gets done, they go away with it, and they're like really happy, perfect, exactly what I wanted. They go out, they release it, they do whatever they want, and then they come back, you know, because they know what they're going to get. I think that's the important thing. I'm not on the cutting edge of new technologies, or I'm not trying to do anything flash or anything like. I'm not trying to do anything
Just
more than I know what to do.
as well.
But yeah, I just what I do is done well.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's what I think is, at this point in my career, I think that's the most important thing, that the priority is that the clients are happy. You know, the priority is that the clients are happier than they were expecting to be for me. You know, I want them to kind of go, this isn't just like 8, 9 out of 10, this is like 11 out of 10. This is more than I was expecting for, you know, because I've got those ideas to add things in they didn't think about, or change this, or do whatever it is, you know. So, but yeah, it's important. Yeah, happiness is important.
Do a lot of the clients you work with often tend to come back to you?
Yeah, most of, I mean, I'd say at the moment my client list is probably somewhere just over 100 artists, but every single one of them I've done at least more than one project with, you know. So it's you know, I haven't got, which I think personally for me is better. You know, it'd be great to have 1,000 clients, but like if I only do one little job for them, it's like 40 quid. Or, you know, 40 quid here, and then I'll never see them again. Whereas I'd rather have a client that comes and brings me an EP, 300 quid, and then 6 months later they're like, oh, I'm doing my album now, can you work on it, because I really liked the way you did my last track, and you know, I want to do my album now, and that's another 600-700 quid, whatever it is. You know, I'd rather make $1,000 from one person in a year than 40 quid here and there from a couple of people.
Yeah.
And for me as well, it's more fulfilling. You know, it's more fulfilling to work on a big project and to have someone come back and go, they trusted me with their stuff and they want me to do more of it, you know, instead of kind of getting an email and saying, oh, can you just edit this little clip for me because I can't be asked to do it myself. It doesn't mean anything, and it's sort of, then I'm doing it like, well, I'm getting paid, but like I'm not really enjoying it. You know, I want to enjoy what I'm doing while I'm doing it.
Yeah, enjoyment is definitely, like, if you're not enjoying it, what's the point in doing
Exactly.
it?
Yeah,
You know, and at a certain point you have to find a middle ground with that, because you know, I mean, you guys are younger at the moment, so it's not as much of a problem for you, but I have rent to pay, I have bills to pay, that kind of thing. So some of the things I do, it's like, yeah, this isn't very fun, but I need to have money to pay the bills, or I ain't eating this month.
Yeah, no,
you know, and it never normally comes to that. I'm normally quite comfortable. I normally have more than I need, but like, you know, sometimes you have to suck it up and do some stuff that you don't want to do.
Yeah.
It's just part of it.
Last question. I haven't got much time left to wrap it up. But,
Sure.
How do you feel the music scene in Southampton is changing? Where do you think it's going in the future? Do you think it's going to...
Dissolve or
Yeah,
expand?
It's a tricky one, that, because like you've said before, you know, you've got venues closing down and things are kind of getting smaller, and I think as well the push in terms of musical education is not great. You know, they're stripping GCSE out of a lot of secondary schools, and there's more of a push for like STEM subjects than there is art subjects, which is terrible, because I know, you know, what they don't realise is that, you know, they'll tell you that the housing sector props up the economy, the banking sector props up the economy. Most of that is digital numbers on a computer that don't actually exist, right? The biggest tangible sector in the whole world in terms of physical assets is the arts. Real generated money, physical money, actual pieces of gold or notes in a bank vault somewhere, is the biggest generating sector is the arts. And I'm talking music, film, games, any form of media, that kind of thing. It's humongous, and it actually it's most of the real money that you see in day-to-day life is comes through the arts. It's one of the biggest sectors, yet it's one of the least pushed, because it's not sort of like academic or important or seen to be relevant or whatever it is. So I think that you're going to see over the next sort of 10 years' time a lot of devolution with education for music, but at the same time I think you're going to start to see a lot more specialist centres popping up, where it's sort of like, okay, you want to do music at secondary school or college, you can't come to us and do it as an extracurricular, do it, which is better, I think, because you can come and be taught by people who really want to teach that, to keep it alive, which means you'll have a better time, you get a better education. Yes, you'll probably have to pay for it, which is going to be the problem for a lot of people, but it's more of a direct push, which I think it'll minimise the exposure for people who could have been in the music industry, but it'll make sure that the people who are going to be important players are still kind of the people who are really dedicated, are the ones who are going to go and actually take the time to go to these special schools and to get the education and be a part of it. I think with there being academies and universities in Southampton, I think music will stay alive educationally for quite a while here. It's not as big of a problem here as it is in some places, because you've got those kind of influencing kind of enterprises. But I think you'll probably see over the next few years, you'll probably see things dying down a little bit, and I think you'll eventually get more of a kind of mid-'80s resurgence, like London punk scene kind of thing. When the kind of soul scene started dying out in the late 70s, there was a bit of a dip. And then when punk came alive, it really went off, and then we went into the kind of the 90s with Britpop and electronic music and that kind of thing, and it carried through. And I think what you'll probably find is that there is I think Southampton's always been a bit of a rock town. And I think that kind of classic rock in a sense is not as popular as it was these days, but you're getting more of a resurgence. You've got like bands like Blackberry Smoke and Greta Van Fleet and that kind of thing, and that kind of older sound is coming back. And I think when that pushes through properly, I think that could be quite a nice revival for the Southampton music scene. I think that would be something that could really push it and make it something bigger than it is at the moment. Yeah. But I think there has to be a little bit of sacrifice before that, before it happens. And I think what we'll probably see is a little bit of it kind of coming down, maybe a few more venues closing down. But what we're left with will be like the hardcore, the like, we will not retreat, and this is our base, and it's only up from here.
People that are passionate about.
Yeah, exactly. Like we end up with a few venues. Might be the Alex, the Hobbit, and the Brook, and that might be it. On the Joiners, you might have just those four left, say. But they're like, we're going to make sure that this scene stays alive. And it's at that point when they realise they're possibly threatened or possibly on the verge of disappearing that it gets a real push, and they're really like, we need to get music up and running. We need to get bands in. We need to get stuff going on, And I think that could be. I mean, there's always that anomaly kind of possibility as well that in the next 6 months, some band from Southampton ends up massive, and then it draws focus to the town, and that kind of thing. But that can happen anywhere at any time.
Yeah, definitely. But Barry Tomorrow a few years ago now, isn't it?
Yeah. So it
came from Southampton University and then shot up.
Yeah, and it draws focus to a certain area. So I think I think the long term it's positive for the local scene, but there may have to be a little bit of bloodshed first.
A little bit of a dip between.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for coming and talking to us.
That's all right.
Thank you for your time.
No worries.